You type your phone number into a sign-up form and hit submit without a flicker of thought. It is just your number, the same 10 digits you have had for years, but in the moment between your tap and the next screen, something you never see has already happened. That number has been looked up, judged, and scored. A service somewhere has asked, quietly and instantly, a whole string of questions about it. Is this a real number on a real network or a disposable one minted for free? How old is it? Has it shown up doing suspicious things elsewhere? And the answer to those questions, decided in under a second, helps determine whether you sail straight in or get quietly flagged for extra friction. Your phone number, it turns out, has a secret reputation, and this is the story of how it got one. That premise starts with how a phone number became so important in the first place, because it was never meant to carry this weight. Somewhere along the way, the humble phone number quietly became one of the internet's main proofs that you are a real, distinct human being. When a service wants to be sure you are a person and not one of 1,000 fake accounts, it asks for a number and sends a code to it. The logic underneath is simple and economic. A phone number, the thinking goes, costs money and effort to obtain, and a person only has so many. So requiring one is supposed to act as a tax on fakery, a small barrier that an ordinary person clears once and the fraudster has to pay again and again. Why? That economic logic is the whole foundation, so it is worth making explicit. Defenses against fake accounts are, at heart, about cost. Anything a real user does once but an attacker must do thousands of times is a lever, because it punishes scale. A phone number was a beautiful fit for this. Real people generally have one, maybe two, tied to a physical SIM card and a paying relationship with the carrier. An operation trying to create accounts by the thousand needs thousands of numbers, and if each genuine number truly costs real money and effort, that requirement alone could make mass fakery uneconomic. The entire system rests on that one assumption, that a trusted number is genuinely expensive to come by. The lookup, so what actually happens in that instant after you submit? The service takes your number and runs it through a lookup, a quick query against databases that know a surprising amount about it. In a fraction of a second, it can learn what kind of number this is, what sort of carrier sits behind it, roughly where it is routed, and whether it carries any flags from past behavior. None of this requires your permission or your awareness. The number itself, by its structure and its history, gives away its character. The service is not really verifying you in that moment. It is appraising your number, weighing whether it looks like the kind a real person carries or the kind a fraud operation churns through. And crucially, this appraisal often happens before any code is even sent. The decision about how much to trust you or whether to bother with you at all can be largely made the instant your number is read, on the strength of what the number itself betrays. The carrier signal, the single most powerful thing that lookup reveals, is the deep divide between two kinds of numbers. On one side are the numbers tied to a genuine physical SIM card on a real mobile network, the kind a person carries in a pocket and pays a bill for every month. On the other side are numbers that exist purely as software, handed out cheaply or freely online, with no physical card and no real carrier relationship behind them. To a defender, these two are worlds apart. A real mobile number carries the cost and friction that made the whole system work. A free virtual number carries almost none, and so almost no trust. And the lookup can usually tell them apart, because the way numbers are organized leaves fingerprints. Blocks of numbers are handed out to carriers in recognizable groups, and the kind of provider behind the number, a real mobile network versus a software service that hands out numbers online, is something these databases track closely. So even though two numbers might look identical to you, just 10 digits, the system behind the lookup often knows immediately that one is anchored to a physical card in someone's pocket and the other is a few seconds old and belongs to nobody in particular. The lookup's first and sharpest question is simply, which of these are you? Virtual numbers. It is worth dwelling on why those free online numbers are treated as nearly worthless, because it reveals the logic of the whole system. The entire value of a phone number, as a proof of humanity, came from its cost. A number that anyone can summon instantly, for nothing, in unlimited quantity, has had its cost stripped away, and with the cost goes the trust. If a fraud operation can mint 1,000 fresh numbers in an afternoon at no expense, then a code sent to one of those numbers proves almost nothing about whether a real person is on the other end. So defenders learn to recognize the ranges and patterns that mark these disposable numbers, and treat a sign-up using one with deep suspicion, sometimes refusing it outright, sometimes letting it through only under heavy extra scrutiny. Age and history. Beyond what kind of number it is, there is the question of what it has done. A number, like an address or an account, accumulates a history, and that history becomes its own quiet record. Has this number been used steadily and normally for a long time, the way a real person's would? Or did it appear recently and immediately get used to create a flurry of accounts across many services? A long, calm, ordinary history reads as trustworthy. A brand new number, or one with a recent record of suspicious bursts, reads as risky. There is a quiet asymmetry in this that favors the patient. Trust takes a long time to build and only a moment to lose. A number earns its good standing slowly, through months and years of looking exactly like an ordinary person, and can forfeit it in a single afternoon of obvious abuse. That is deliberate. It means a fraud operation cannot simply acquire a fresh number and immediately enjoy the trust of an aged one, because the aging itself, the long quiet history, is the thing that cannot be faked quickly. The number is being judged not just on what it is, but on the shape of its past, the same way reputation works everywhere else in these systems. The reputation databases, and here is the part that ties it all together and makes it powerful. This knowledge is shared. There are databases drawing on signals from across many services that effectively keep a running reputation score on phone numbers at large. A number that gets flagged for abuse on one platform can carry that shadow with it to the next. So when you arrive at a new service, it is not judging your number from a blank slate. It may already be drawing on a collective memory built from that number's behavior across the wider internet. This is the same centralizing pattern that runs through so much of online defense. A signal seen anywhere becomes a signal known everywhere, and a number that misbehaves in one place finds doors quietly harder to open elsewhere. How fraud rings respond. Now the adversarial side, told strictly as how these defenses are pressured and how they hold. Operations built to create fake accounts at scale live and die on their supply of trusted-looking numbers. The cheap virtual numbers are largely useless to them, scored as worthless on site. So they are pushed toward acquiring numbers that look real, which is precisely the expensive, friction-heavy thing the whole system was designed to force. And even when they obtain such numbers, those numbers burn. Once a number has been used to spin up fraudulent accounts, it accumulates a bad reputation and becomes flagged, forcing a constant, costly churn through fresh numbers. The defender's entire goal is to keep that churn as expensive and slow as possible. The arms race, so the fight settles into a familiar shape. The defender works to ensure that only genuinely costly, genuinely trustworthy numbers earn easy passage, and to spot and burn the rest quickly. The other side works endlessly to find supplies of numbers that still look real and unflagged, staying one step ahead of the reputation lists. It is a constant hunt on one side for fresh, clean, trusted-looking numbers, and a constant effort on the other to recognize and devalue them the moment they show their nature. The ground keeps shifting, but the underlying contest never changes. Cost against evasion of cost. Why the defender has leverage. The advantage, here as elsewhere, leans toward the defender, and for the same fundamental reason. The entire attack depends on numbers that are cheap and plentiful, and the entire defense is about forcing them to be expensive and scarce. It is the same lever we keep returning to across all of these systems, the deliberate engineering of cost. Whatever a real person does once, but a fraud operation must do 10,000 times, becomes the place to apply pressure, because pressure there scales against the attacker and barely touches the honest. Every time the defender successfully insists on a real costly number and burns it after misuse, they impose exactly the tax the system was built to impose. They do not have to make fraud impossible. They only have to keep the cost of a trusted number high enough that mass fakery stops being worth it. And because they can watch numbers misbehave across the whole internet and share that knowledge, they get to raise that cost continuously, faster than the other side can find fresh supply. The double edge. But it would be dishonest to leave out who gets hurt by all this, so name it plainly. These systems make rough judgments about people based on the number they happen to hold. And rough judgments catch the innocent, someone with a perfectly legitimate but unusual kind of number, a traveler, a person on a budget service, someone whose number lives in a range that happens to look suspicious, can find themselves locked out of ordinary services for no fault of their own, unable to prove they are real because their number was judged before they ever spoke. And the number can inherit a bad reputation from a previous owner, leaving a new holder quietly punished for sins that were never theirs. The same machinery that taxes the fraudster taxes the unlucky, and they have no way to see why. And there is a quieter unfairness underneath. Requiring a real costly phone number to take part in ordinary online life turns a basic resource into a gate, one that weighs hardest on exactly the people with the least. A system designed to price out fraud also, inevitably, prices out some of the poor, the transient, and the simply unusual. What it is really about. So here is the part to sit with. Those 10 digits you hand over without a thought are not just a way to reach you. They are a credential, carrying a hidden score that follows them everywhere, judged in an instant by systems you never see, on the basis of a history you cannot read. Most of the time, if your number is ordinary and well behaved, the verdict is yes and you never notice the trial happened at all. But it always happens, and understanding it changes how you read every form that asks for your number, every code that arrives in a text. Behind that small ordinary request is a quiet appraisal of who you probably are. Decide it before you have said a single word about yourself. If this is the kind of thing you find yourself thinking about, the quiet machinery under the everyday internet, then this channel is your sort of place. There is no product to sell you here. It is just the systems taken apart and explained by someone who has spent a long time on the inside of them. Subscribe and follow the rabbit hole. Next time, we are going to look at one of the strangest tricks in the whole book. How a website can ask your device to quietly draw a tiny, invisible picture, a few words and shapes you will never see, and then read back the result to build an identity that follows you across the entire web, surviving everything you do to shake it off.